Unsurprisingly, for a game that wears its religious inspirations rather obviously on its sleeve, prayers play a big part in the gameplay of Blasphemous. Only, in this game, they are perhaps a little more literal than one may be used to. Oh, grievous miracle that may or may not be in some way related to the Penitent One's source of power? Honestly, I don't know. Tell me in the comments. Smite down this blasphemer with holy lightning. Atomize this sinner with divine light. Launch this offensive cretin into outer space with Yolde Kamehameha. All jokes aside though, it should be clear that prayers have the potential to be incredibly useful in the Penitent One's journey. The top end prayers like the Debla of the Lights or Lorquiana can be absolutely devastating support tools that augment the Penitent One's martial abilities. But what about if we don't use them in their intended support role and instead put them front and centre by trying to beat Blasphemous using only prayers?
Excellent!
The Penitent One rises from the dead and the challenge begins. Then immediately ends as we come face to face with the game's first boss, the Warden of the Silent Sorrow. For the purists amongst you, you may as well tune out at this point, as it became immediately clear that beating the game using only prayers would be entirely impossible, simply due to the fact that we can't get access to any prayers before the first boss. I chose not to worry about this though, as getting hung up on this would detract from what would otherwise become a really interesting run. Instead, I beat him to death with the Mea Culpa and started the challenge proper. Proceeding through, dodging enemies as best we could, we came across the first prayer available to us in this run, Verdiales of the Forsaken Hamlet. This relatively weak prayer sends bidirectional shockwaves that travel across the ground and walls when cast. It will be our mainstay for a decent chunk of the early run, although we won't actually be using it for a while due to our extremely limited fervour and means of restoring fervour. Which nicely raises the first major obstacle of this challenge. Sure, prayers have the potential to do mega damage, but casting a prayer requires spending fervour, which is designed to be gathered in one of two ways: whacking your foes with the Mea Culpa repeatedly, or sacrificing your own health and tears of atonement to restore an itsy bitsy sliver. The first of these routes is immediately unacceptable. Whacking an enemy with a sword sure doesn't seem like it fits into a prayer only run. With that said, I'm going to be upfront with this one, and make it clear that I didn't bother to enforce this restriction when it came to tackling environmental hazards, such as chimes or invisible walls. Judge me on this if you want, but there is a fine line between arbitrary rules and sucking the fun out of a challenge run. The second route for restoring fervour is much more appropriate for this run. However, it does come with its own handful of nightmare obstacles in the form of resource management. Having to spend at least 25 tears of atonement, and I do mean at least 25 tears, for every small fervour restore simply may not be sustainable if we can't make profit from killing regular enemies. At least in the early game, this could put a very real blocker in our way. It's possible to pick up a fair number of tears from the items lying around the world, but if there aren't enough, or if we burn through them by dying in boss battles, then that could be game over. The health loss is less of an issue, but it could still play a role in boss fights. Our health pool effectively puts a hard cap on the number of casts we have available, especially if we have to heal from taking a blow or two from the boss. Initial testing against the game's first real boss immediately proved that my concerns were at least somewhat valid. 10 Piedad is really quite easy and has a pretty small health pool, yet it was obvious that getting past him would require landing pretty much every cast of our prayer without taking damage in response. We went in with a full fervour bar and went to work. When we ran out of fervour, a few blood sacrifices taken at opportune moments topped us off and gave us a few extra precious casts. When our health got a little low, we topped it off, ensuring not to overheal and accidentally create a limiting factor on the number of blood sacrifices we could make in total. It was easy enough to dodge his blows and land solid damage, although we did receive a few bumps for our efforts. And then we ran out of fervour, health, and options, so had to chalk this one up as a failure. A little bit of experimentation over a few more attempts led to a few interesting results though, that we could use later on in the run. Firstly, when we die, our maximum fervour decreases, which is objectively terrible for a run like this. However, a guilt fragment does get left behind, which can often be collected in the middle of the boss fight. Doing so restores a decent chunk of fervour and health, as well as restoring maximum fervour. With a bit of smart planning, it's possible to hold off on collecting this fragment until later in the fight, hence increasing the overall number of casts available. Theoretically, it could even be possible to leave multiple fragments available to collect in a single boss fight. Although, I only thought about this while writing the script, so, I didn't do that. Secondly, Viridiana is available in a few of the boss fights, and she can heal us when our health gets low, essentially boosting our maximum number of casts for the fight. This wasn't something I wanted to use given a choice, as it felt like it fell into a bit of a grey area in terms of the rules, but I was absolutely not above making use of her if completely necessary. With all that experimentation complete, it was clear that 10 Piedad was absolutely beatable at this point. But in the process of finding that out, I had more or less exhausted her tiers of atonement. Being that I had no means of making a profit from killing regular enemies at this point, this loss could arguably already be a run ender at some unknown point down the line. And that really wasn't worth the risk when there is absolutely no need to take 10 Piedad on this early. There was no reason for me not to explore the game world as much as possible first, unlocking health and fervour upgrades, unlocking new bile flasks, and possibly even new prayers that would ensure safer victory. Perhaps more importantly, this approach would allow me to gather up as many tiers as I could so that I had a better sense of what resources I actually had access to before committing to taking on any particular boss. With all that in mind, I instead chose to do a bit of upfront planning and to come up with a route that would give me access to all I needed. It was this planning that revealed the second major problem of this run. Regardless of the health and fervour upgrades I could potentially unlock, the second and third bosses would still be somewhere between borderline and absolutely impossible with the game's first prayer. I did some testing on boss rush with full upgrades, and it was possible to beat Angustias with some smart use of Verdiales, although the health and fervour cost made me really question if there were enough upgrades available early in the game to make this fight possible in reality. This wasn't the fight that truly had me worried though. Testing against Her Lady of the Charred Visage showed that we simply couldn't hurt her no matter what we did. We can't cast prayers in midair, and she is never close enough to the ground or walls to be caught in her blast. I couldn't rightly blag that beating up another boss with the mea culpa shouldn't be treated as a challenge failure, unless I'd exhausted all of the possible options. I had an idea though, and that was enough for me to give it a go. After a quick restart and another questionable battle with the Warden of the Silent Sorrow, I got to exploring. Our first stop was in Mercy Dreams, where we collected the small bead of red wax to boost our maximum health. And then a trip to the shop to purchase the key to the Chamber of the Eldest Brother. In the Brotherhood of the Silent Sorrow, we make use of our key to grab the blood perpetuated in sand, an important item that opens up access to a number of items throughout the game. We immediately put this to use by returning to the Wasteland of Buried Churches to grab a critical item, Tentudia's Carnal Remains. If you know the game well, I'm sure this is where you might start seeing the solution to one of our challenges. After a quick trip through the Mountains of Endless Dusk, where we do a passable impersonation of being a pincushion, we face off against Pepetva. Well, face off isn't accurate to be honest. We let her utterly crush us, so we don't have to spend any of our precious fervour or tears. Our trip through John Doe involves getting slapped about more times than I would honestly care to admit. It was a worthwhile trip though, with us grabbing an empty bile flask and then filling it nearby. We then proceed to smash the first chain-holding statue using the mea culpa, and more importantly, I give some of you the perfect excuse to tell me in the comments that I've failed the challenge again.
Actually, can you shut the fuck up?
From there, we head down into Echoes of Sol to grab a few important items and to make sure we don't accidentally miss out on the game's true ending. After wrestling with the game's awful sword boost jump thing for an absolute eternity, I was overcome with bloodthirsty rage!
Y'all take a chill!
Thankfully, my first attempt back rewarded me with my prize. I guess when they say you need to take regular breaks when playing video games, they aren't completely wrong. Anyway, the prize was the fire enclosed in enamel, an awesome bead that boosts casting speed, so this got promptly and permanently equipped. Our most important reason for being down here though was to visit Pepetva's tomb and collect the incomplete scapular, an item that we need to collect before the fight with Esdras, or else we are locked out of the true ending. After a bit of story exposition, where we find out that Pepetva would much rather we didn't murder her brother Esdras. We grab the aforementioned item and make our way out of the gloomy depths. After enjoying the cold winter sun of where olive trees wither for the briefest of moments, we put our evasion to the test and head down an optional route to grab another essential item, Tentudia's hair. In the Graveyard of the Peaks, our first stop has us grab the Immaculate Bead. I'm not going to worry about using the bead for a while, but I will need it to access the true ending. Then comes the treacherous ascent up the mountain itself, which is quite a challenge in all honesty. The first problem we face is that there are enemies that we simply must kill in order to progress. The statues that live in the walls block the route forward. They do go down in a single cast most of the time, but each cast costs us some fervour, which ultimately costs us some tears, and brings us slightly closer to defeat. The second problem is the platforming itself, which relies upon us picking our moments to jump when the wind is blowing the right way. That's simple most of the time, but when you have a number of enemies bombing towards you, it's much trickier. Suffice to say, I picked my moments to cast very carefully to get some bonus kills that helped clear the path. Following an impressive long jump that resulted in grabbing another empty bile flask, we take the first minor knock of the run, a stumble into the abyss leading to a respawn. This wouldn't normally be a big deal, but with the previous enemies having respawned, we have to repay the tears cost of climbing the mountain once more. On the bright side though, some more careful dodging on the second attempt led us to our first fervour upgrade along with a free refill. We conquer the final cliff, then head on into the convent of Our Lady of the Charred Visage, and an immediate mini crisis. After that climb, I was desperate to get to the Piedad and avoid losing our progress. Enter the sister with her censer, who doesn't like to be dodged through, hits like a truck, and is pretty good at knocking you out of the air when you try to jump over her. Honestly, getting past her is as easy as timing your slide when she attacks, but this took me far longer to spot than I would have liked, and I was panicking. After resting, we bypass a number of enemies on the route to the shortcut to the bottom of the mountain, which when unlocked and conveniently allows us to unlock our first health upgrade, further boosting our casting pool for each boss fight. A trip down to Albero sees us drop off a number of herbs, which significantly shores up our stock of tears as we begin to start looking towards taking down some of the bosses. With these tears in hand, we buy the torn bridal ribbon and set that to one side, before making our way through the convent. This is a relatively uneventful journey, with most of the enemies being pretty easy to dodge. We need to take some care during a few sections as we balance dodging with our need to progress through some platforming sections that require reasonably precise timings. One of these sections has us banzai through a hallway getting blasted as we go. It's worth it though, with the reward being a fervour upgrade from the small ball of blue wax. Finally then, after all that setup, we come face to face with Piedad in what can be expected to be a fairly convincing victory. Well, that's assuming I fight back and don't simply let him knock 7 shades of sin out of me. With that minor setup in place to ensure we maximise the fervour available to us, we head into the fight and take it more seriously this time. Sliding under his stomp attacks creates a nice opportunity to cast, as long as you don't forget about the follow-up thorns. Dodging his arm sweep attacks is simple enough, and presents us with a decent chance to dish out some damage. The thorn wall attack is also a great opportunity. As long as you are back far enough away before casting, the hitbox here seems like it might be bigger than most, resulting in a few extra pings of damage. We proceed through the battle as you might expect, dodging every blow and countering with a cast when we can. After exhausting our fervour bar, we begin making use of blood sacrifices where necessary to carry on the fight. It's all smooth sailing until I get backed into a corner and expect to take a decent wallop for my carelessness. Somehow though, the damage never happens. We proceed until both ours and the boss's health starts to get on the low side, at which point we grab the guilt fragment for a bit of a top up. This saves us a handful of tears from blood sacrifices and gives us the fervour we need to get over the line. Scratch one big tree goat demon thingy. With 10 Piedad down, we make our way through the newly unlocked Desecrated Cistern to grab some more important items and upgrades, including extra health and a fervour upgrade. More importantly though than both of those, we grab the Black Grieving Veil. From there, we head down to Grievance Ascends, which is quite honestly frustrating as always. There are quite a few enemies that need to be dodged, coupled with moving clouds of acid, resulting in a few bumps and bruises. The tricky bits though are the challenge rooms, where we must kill several enemies to proceed. The bell ghosts aren't too bad as they can be taken down in a single hit in theory. I dodged about a lot to create the right moment for a double kill, but unfortunately didn't quite get it. The ghostly fencers are much more annoying though, as they take numerous casts, making them costly to deal with. The journey was worth it though. After climbing upwards past a wall statue, some bell ghosts and some acid clouds, then braving a room full of various enemies and collapsing platforms, we are able to secure the last item we need for a very important quest, the melted golden coin. With this in hand, we head back and then downwards to find 3 golden offering plates. After handing over our hard fought items, we meet Altus Gracias, who gives us the Egg of Deformity. Without a moment's pause, we take this to the Mountains of Endless Dusk to hatch it, then promptly head back to Albero to unlock the 3 gnarled tongues. With this, we can clamber up the now accessible vines and access something vital. In the Graveyard of the Peaks, we ascend higher than ever before and grab the final item required to unlock our second prayer of the run, Tentudia's skeletal remains. By returning all 3 of Tentudia's remains to the church in Albero, we unlock literal death from above, Debla of the Lights, an awesome beam of light that deals massive damage and allows us to attack enemies above us. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is expensive on the old Fervour bar, meaning we may be making our tier shortage even worse, but if it can secure victory against a boss or 2, then it might be worth it. We proceed to put Debla of the Lights to the test by bringing it to bear against her lady of the Charred Visage, which goes about as well as you would hope, if I'm honest. Each attack wipes out around 12 to 15% of her health bar, which is a welcome surprise. With our setup, we get 2 casts before having to resort to blood sacrifices or collecting guilt fragments. As long as we are careful, take the time, and dodge our attacks, then we have more than enough resources to get through this fight. We stick with it, dodging energy blasts, laser beams and fireballs, then before you know it, the first phase comes and goes. The second phase means we get double attacked and have to pick our moments with a bit more care, although a well-timed prayer can even deflect some attacks while dishing out the damage. We grab the guilt fragment when we need a top up, lay down an attack when the opportunity presents itself, and then push on. After one final flurry, which results in us actually taking a blow, we deliver our finisher and defeat her lady, then move on. The fight against Angustias is pretty simple. Debla of the Lights does damage that appears to be at least partially related to the number of targets hit, but regardless of whether or not we get the perfect hit, we typically do around 10 to 15% damage per cast. This means we need 10 decent casts at most, which is quite doable with our current resources. In the first phase, there is a lot of dodging around looking for the right moment to strike. We take quite a few blows, but with our current health pool, they don't make much of a difference. We keep chipping away using blood sacrifices as necessary, until the second phase of the fight. The second phase is perhaps even easier, with us only needing to dodge the magic blasts and cast when the boss is in a position that will not be immediately targeted. A few casts later, and we can wrap this fight up and move on to the middle section of the run. We head to the bridge of the Three Calvaries where Esdras awaits. As keen as he is for a big old scrap, his sister steps in to nope him, causing him to reconsider and setting us off on the path towards the true ending. More on that later. For now though, he does hand us another fun prayer, the Taranto to my sister, another vertical cast that brings down bolts of lightning. As good a position as we appear to be in at this point in the run, what with us having some decent prayers and a pretty sizable stock of tears, I know that we are only a few failed boss fights away from coming undone due to running out of tears. Which leads me to the solution I was hoping to be able to implement at this stage. By grinding out all the tears I can by returning remains to the crypt and handing in herbs, we are able to get over 10,000 tears. This immediately gets deposited in the teeth box in the church in Albero, which almost bankrupts us. Not that this really matters anymore. The upgrade provided by this means that we now restore all of our fervour when we rest, essentially giving us unlimited casts on regular enemies so that we can grind out tears. We are still limited in terms of the maximum number of casts possible within a single boss fight, but no longer do we need to worry about dying. We have become the master of death. In Mother of Mothers, we begin making use of our Fervour to grab some tears as we progress upwards. We battle through the swinging giant sensor corridor, and then make our way up to the smoking heart of incense. This adds an extra 100% damage to our prayers, while also doubling the casting cost. I tried this out during various fights, and it just wasn't for me. Doubling the cost per cast just means that the penalty was more severe when you miss. It also seemed to strangely affect casting cooldown, which really wasn't ideal. We then made our way down to the library of the Negated words. This section contained quite a few enemies that could be annoying, such as the book throwers, particularly in sections where I was trying to avoid triggering book ghosts. While travelling through the area, we make a point of chatting with Diosdado, and then dealing with his banging ghost problem, since this will be necessary for the game's true ending, specifically for accessing the Knot of 3 words later on. More importantly, however, this area contains an absolute treasure trove of valuable goods. Firstly, we get Lorquiana, the horizontal beam attack we saw earlier. This can do some decent damage, is useful in long corridors with many enemies, and may be suitable against some bosses that are mostly ground bound. Sitting at the other end of the functionality spectrum, we have Romance of the Crimson Mist, which essentially deals solid damage to enemies that we are able to stay very close to. I can see both of them serving some function later in the run. The most exciting treasure though is the drop of coagulated ink, a bead that will be equipped for evermore. It simply doubles our prayer damage without any downside whatsoever, and is the perfect tool for making the middle section of this run an absolute cakewalk. I should however note that it stacks additively rather than multiplicatively with the Smoking Heart of Incense, so having them both equipped simultaneously doesn't mitigate my previous concerns about the Smoking Heart in any way, shape or form. With easy modes at least temporarily activated, we simply montage the middle of the game. Exposito is up first and he lasts less than 20 seconds, dying to 4 mega powered casts of Devil of the Lights. Our next victim is Melquiades, the exhumed Archbishop, who manages to do a considerably better job than Exposito, lasting around 1 minute. Before we can damage him, we have to damage the hands holding him up enough that they drop him, which does slow us down. Melquiades falls after 4 blows to the face, without causing any real concern though. Up on the wall of Holy Prohibitions, we embarrass the Twin Wardens for daring to think they could threaten us, then simply dodge and weave our way through the jail below. Well, dodge, weave, and get bodied by the prisoners. Then we come face to face with Quirce, returned by the flames. Of the 3 mid-game bosses, he is definitely the one that gives us the most trouble. He is fast and nimble, not staying still long enough to take a prayer to the face very often. Also, his health bar is either quite big, or his magic resistance is high, as he takes less damage than the previous 2 bosses did. It's the sort of fight where my carelessness gets the better of me, in all honesty. I cast at the wrong times, I make blood sacrifices at the wrong times, I misjudge spacing and take attacks to the face, and he punishes me, even managing to take me down simply because I didn't bother to heal due to overconfidence. I won't hold you in any suspense though. I pull my thumb out of my ass on the second attempt and actually try, taking him down in around 1 minute. With the easy middle section of the game out of the way, I turn my attention towards making sure I'm going to access the game's true ending. Our first job is repeated ritual Harry-Carry with the Immaculate Bead equipped, resulting in us unlocking the Weight of True Guilt. From there, we decimate the Confessor statue dungeons, leading to the Custodia of Sin. After that, a quick chat with Esdras points me towards the Knot of the 3 words, where we are informed that we need to tangle with some of the toughest bosses, Sierpes and Isadora. Challenge back on! The journey through Echoes of Salt towards Sierpes is non-trivial. The enemies hit pretty hard, and the electrical traps give me pause, but realistically they can't stop us considering all of the upgrades we have available at this stage. Sierpes herself does manage to cause more than just a moment of pause on this expedition. We go in first with our old faithful, Devil of the Lights, and quickly find out that the damage we deal is utterly pitiful. Our first attempt wasn't horrible, but I couldn't remember the boss's patterns, and I got knocked about left, right and centre. I did manage to dish out quite a chunk of damage in return though. That being said, Debla didn't feel like the right solution. It just left me in awkward positions and limited my mobility. The casting time was also too long, and a lot of my damage potential was going to waste as Sierpes moved out of range. Regardless of how well or badly the fight was going though, I did have to forfeit it to restock my tears, as I had completely burned through my stock. This made me very glad that I had solved my tear grinding problem earlier in the run. Second time, I go in with a whole load of tears and a different plan. Enter Romance of the Crimson Mist for better damage control and mobility. I basically just stuck to her weak point like glue throughout the fight and didn't worry about much else. The damage output was absolutely colossal, so much so that it was most effective for me to just stay right up in her face and take most of the blows sent my way on the chin. 2 minutes of being a creepy snake stalker later, and we get the fake out chomp that signals we have slain this foul beast. From there, we were on to everyone's favourite boss, Isadora. I was expecting this one to cause some difficulty, and I wasn't entirely wrong. A blast of Debla of the Lights makes it obvious that we are in a much better position damage-wise than we were with Sierpes, but that relief really doesn't last long. She is fast, hard to hit, hard to dodge, and hits like an absolute truck. With the first attempt not going well, I tried a few different prayers out. I bring out Lorquiana, and it's alright, definitely faster than Debla, allowing me to more readily land blows than dodge out of the way, but it does have the problem of being a horizontal attack. Isadora isn't particularly bound to the ground, so we miss chances to attack. It's not even like I can work around this by swapping on the fly to bring Debla back in, as we can't use our menu in this awesome fight. Taranto to my sister got a turn next, and it performs pretty well. I don't know if the casting is actually any faster than Debla, or if I just started to warm up a bit, but my survivability had absolutely increased. We were able to reduce our health by around half due to having some vertical attack capability before we finally succumbed. The solution here became kind of obvious though through this experimentation. It didn't really matter what prayer I used. What mattered is how absolutely bodied I was getting. I'd gotten a bit sloppy with the last few bosses being much simpler, and I'd forgotten that I actually had to learn the boss's patterns to defend myself. Now, I'm not going to claim that the victorious run was perfect by any stretch of the imagination. However, with a little care taken to block at least some of the attacks, and stepping out of the way from time to time, I was able to make progress. Debla was particularly useful when she was making use of her vertical fireball attack, and during the phase transition into the harder second half of the battle. It was very close during the second phase, as I wasn't really sure of our pattern at all, but with enough persistence and luck, we were able to push on and bring down the undead songstress in about 2.5 minutes. With our 2 greatest foes to date vanquished, we were ready to bring this challenge towards a swift close. Or at least that's what I expected before I recalled that Crisanta is a proper beast at the best of times, particularly when you have to deal with her second phase. This one took a few attempts. She is definitely mechanically easier than Isadora, particularly once you remember her attack pattern and are able to block fairly consistently. But I found opportunities to attack harder to capitalise upon. Knowing how fast she can be, my initial instinct was to make use of Romance of the Crimson Mist again, and it seemed like an amazing choice, at least on the first attempt. I absolutely wrecked the first 2/3 of her first phase health bar just by staying really close to her. The damage was awesome, and she wasn't posing much of a threat. Towards the end of the phase though, things began to change, with her getting far too fast and difficult to hurt. With a lot of persistence, I was able to push through to the second phase and deal a bit of damage to her, but I knew straight away that with her movement speed being what it was, this was going to be a barrier against using Crimson Mist. After a little back and forward, we fell, and then began to rework the plan. The answer was obvious. Unlike Isadora, Crisanta is a very grounded opponent, making Lorquiana a great tool to use against her. That being said, we still couldn't just cast wildly and hope for the best. She is fast and she likes to counter, so we would be punished often if we were too wild. With a bit of trial and error, I found that in the first phase I just needed to take time to dodge her attacks and wait until she left herself open. There really wasn't any secret trick to it, other than not being ridiculously greedy. I absolutely got punished once again for being careless, but not enough that it mattered on the grand scale of things. The second phase was honestly easier in some ways. She was a lot faster, and this left me with fewer chances to blood sacrifice or attack. But I found that backing myself into the corner was really effective. I could block her attacks fairly predictably, leading to a perfect window for a safe follow-up blast. Her aerial attacks were mostly ineffective due to her bouncing off of the side of the arena, which again created a great chance for me to blood sacrifice. The beam sword shockwave attack was also perfect to capitalise upon, with us landing a blow or two or getting some recovery time. I wouldn't say I mastered this section, particularly as our overhead attacks caught me out each and every single time, and the winning attempt did flirt aggressively with failure. That being said, I also wouldn't say I ever felt like I was in major danger of getting stuck here, as our predictability was quite easy to work with. After a few more blasts, we bring Crisanta to her knees, stare lovingly into her eyes for a brief moment, and then free her from the influences of the highballs. At last, we have someone to love us for the strange, religious nutball mute we are. And that's pretty much it if I'm being honest. We have a quick chat with Crisanta to ensure we will unlock the true ending, but when it comes to getting there, it's just a victory lap. Well, sort of. There is one more small complication, but we'll get to that. His Holiness Escobar goes down to 3 simple casts of Lorquiana. The last Son of the Miracle requires a little bit more effort, as we have to take out the golden sword before we can deal any damage, but this isn't exactly taxing. It does like to dodge out of the way, so we waste a few casts, but with the right timing, 1 cast is enough to deal with it. Debla of the Lights is also made for this fight. We can completely shred the boss's health bar without even getting close to attack his face. It's honestly an absolute pleasure, at least compared to when I fought this guy in my previous challenge run, trying to beat Blasphemous without any upgrades. You should really check that out. I'll link it at the end of the video. Anyway, we stumble through this fight, and following 2 rounds of no real challenge later, his skin melts away and we celebrate the foregone completion of this run. Or possibly not. We have to face off against Escobar one more time, and it's not even really a fight. We can't lose. I mean, sure, we can be killed, and he does hit pretty hard, but if we die, we just get thrown back in to try again from this point. The problem though, is we simply can't use prayers, no matter what we do. It is actually impossible. And that's kind of all there is to it. We have to finish the run, but to do so, we have to once again violate its primary rule. We have to use the mea culpa. I agonise over this for a little while, seeing if there were any glitches I could exploit, but I simply couldn't find a way. So where does this challenge leave us then? Well, technically it's a failure, I suppose, but not in a way that detracts any real joy from the accomplishment. I still got the joy of figuring out how to work around the game's mechanics. I still got the joy of beating the game's toughest bosses using only prayers. I still got the joy of slapping this big red bastard in his big red face. I still got the joy of chopping him in half. And I still got the joy of forcefully telling the high wills where they can stick it. I'm a simple man. That joy will do. In the meantime, if you need an intense challenge fix, why don't you check out the video linked on screen? That one is a real doozy. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you on the next one. Goodbye.